Well, it's been a few days since the Memorandum of Understanding was signed between the Prime Minister and Alberta's Premier, and it's garnering praise from some and criticism from others. But will a pipeline even be built? To discuss this, I'm going to bring in Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley. Brian, hello.
Yeah, you're talking to a guy from Toronto about a pipeline from Alberta to BC. I've already
hmm
heard I don't know anything about the West, Jeanette. I don't know anything about your province. But yeah, we'll get to it. But I think a pipeline will be built, and I think Danielle Smith got a big win here.
Okay, so yeah, it's a few days, and I know you had a lot of praise for what the premier was able to accomplish, but now we seem to have several different interpretations on what this MOU actually even means. So, for example, does BC have a veto on a pipeline?
Not according to the Memorandum of Understanding, but you've got some backbench Liberal MPs trying to make that claim. You've got different claims from the Prime Minister. Look, the document that the Premier and the Prime Minister signed, I've covered more MOUs than I can remember. And most of the time, I can't remember them because they're boring, they're vague, they have no details. This one has details. It has timelines, it has commitments. Alberta will do this, Canada will do that. By this date, this will happen. By this date, that will happen. This was a really good agreement. I spoke to Premier Smith, did an interview with her last Friday, late in the day. It was shortly after she was booed at the UCP convention in Edmonton. Yep. But it was shortly after that. And she said, look, I got 7 of 9 bad laws dealt with. So this was a major win. But how is it going to be implemented? I guess that becomes the question right now. And what I would say is people need to stop underestimating Danielle Smith. This woman has been incredibly successful in so many different ways that, I've known her for a long time, but I didn't expect her to, transition as well from back from media to politics. And she'd been in politics before. She's doing incredibly well right now for your province. I think that most people should look at this MOU as a good first step. Doesn't solve everything, but it moves things in the right direction. You shouldn't have to have it, but that's the political landscape that we're in right now. So this was a very good move for her. Now, Liberals, I think part of the reason that we're getting so many different claims from Liberals, cabinet ministers, the PM, backbenchers, is Liberals are worried about what this means because it was such a good win for Alberta. And now, if you're a BC Liberal MP, you're like, I'm a little worried. Or, if you got elected promising that climate change was your number one thing, you're panicked at this point. But overall, I would say a good win for Danielle Smith. And, we'll go from there.
Yeah. So at this point, you ultimately don't know whether or not a pipeline could actually be built as a result of this MOU. Time will tell,
Well,
basically. We'll
well,
see.
none of us do, but I believe one will be. There is a deadline for July 1st of next year to
Wow.
find a private sector proponent for a pipeline. And, speaking with Premier Smith, she said that, the private sector players are already at the table with her and helping to craft how things might look, what the regulatory framework might be. All of these things are happening in the background before the MOU was even signed. And so, look, capital expenditures are not, something that you turn around in a month or two. But if we look at where TC Energy and Enbridge, two of the biggest players, were back in August, they were announcing their capex for the coming year. And if you remember, TC Energy said they were going to put 8.5 billion into the US because Canada was not a good bet at this point. Well, if they're making that announcement in August, you know that by July 1st, these companies, and both of them made their announcements at about the same time, these companies will have an idea of what they're going to do by July 1st. So what she said to me is that there will be one company or perhaps a consortium of companies that will come forward as the proponent. There has been no proponent because the bad laws were in place. The regulatory environment was so bad. So when you hear Liberal MPs running around and saying, but there's no proponent, so don't worry, there's no pipeline. Well, they're trying to play defense because they don't want the pipeline. And the fact is that this MOU removes so many of the impediments. So I think there will be a private sector proponent by July 1st. I think that Premier Smith was already working on that long before this happened, so that somebody or several somebodies were there to step in and say, yes, I'll back you.
hmm I mean, and we've heard obviously BC's David Eby be very critical of it and be very loud about it. Um, any chance that he would come around, or is there anything in it for BC at this point?
Well, he's now talking about, well, he's not opposed to another pipeline if it goes to Vancouver. He's not opposed to another pipeline, but he doesn't want the tanker ban lifted. You've got the Assembly of First Nations in Ottawa meeting today, voting to say,
Mhm.
no, we're not going to allow a pipeline through. Here's the thing: despite claims to the contrary, there is no veto for BC. There is no veto for Indigenous groups. Does there have to be meaningful and real consultation? Yes. But if you remember Northern Gateway, well, that was a project that had strong Indigenous support. First Nations groups along the route supported it. It was AstroTurf groups funded by the Americans that said no to this sort of thing. And we've got to watch out for that again, for American foundations, be it tides or otherwise, sending in millions and millions of dollars to drum up fake opposition to this when people on the ground are saying yes. Now, look, if it doesn't end up as a pipeline to the northwest coast of British Columbia, but there ends up being another pipeline that can move 1 million barrels a day to Vancouver, I don't think Premier Smith will be overly upset about that. And by the way, this deal, excuse me, as I discussed with her, also really makes moving forward with Keystone XL, which South Bow out of Calgary, that's a spinoff from TC Energy. It makes it much more likely that that could go forward as well. I'm not sure that it will, but it opens things up for South Bow to be able to say, okay, do we want to renew this? Do we want to go down this path again? Because, Keystone XL has been a political football for so many years.
And Brian, it's not just members of Mark Carney's Liberal Party who are critical of the MOU or BC's premier. Here in Alberta, the UCP government just had their AGM over the weekend, as you mentioned there. And Smith got booed when talking about Alberta being part of a united Canada. So she was criticized by separatists because soon after the MOU was signed, Carney implemented something like a 600% increase in the industrial carbon tax for Alberta. So Jeffrey Rath with the separatist-minded Alberta Prosperity Project was really firing up the crowd about that. What are your thoughts on that, Brian?
So there has been no increase in the industrial carbon tax yet. They're negotiating that. That's the
Mm-hmm.
reality.
Mm-hmm.
They are, and Premier Smith said, okay, Alberta will control the industrial carbon tax. We will decide where it will be. We'll negotiate with you on that. But in exchange, we get all these other things. So, yes, I know that some people don't like the industrial carbon tax. In a negotiation, you're not going to get everything you want. And look, if you are hell bent on saying Alberta will be a separate country or will join the United States, well, then nothing that Premier Smith is going to do will satisfy you. And there are definitely people like that. But for a negotiation, you're never going to get everything. I would say that she got more than she gave up. And will the industrial carbon tax get to $135 a ton in a couple of years? That may happen. That was scheduled to happen already, but now Alberta is going to control it. So I would still say that that is a win for Premier Smith, and maybe it's the price that she's got to pay to get everything else happening. And as I said, if you're determined that you're headed in the separatist direction, then nothing much is going to satisfy you.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of Premier Smith, she's unveiling how Alberta will push back against the federal gun confiscation program. So there are reports that in the pilot project in Cape Breton, just 22 guns were collected. What's that all about? Is this program doomed to fail even without Alberta's new actions?
Yeah, look, Saskatchewan's already basically blocked this from happening. They've got their own program. Alberta's announced theirs today, but doesn't look like the public's buying in. In Cape Breton, I'm told that there were as many as 2,000 guns. So they didn't do all of Nova Scotia. They just did Cape Breton Island. They just did a small part of Nova Scotia.
Mhm.
And I'm told that based on records, should be about 2,000 guns. But the government said we're aiming for 200. And local reports, which the government has not denied, say there were only 22 seized. And some of them
Wow.
weren't even on the banned list. It was just, grandpa's hunting rifle and grandpa passed away and we don't know what to do with it. Here you go. So, I mean, that's all they're
Mhm.
collecting on a
Mhm.
program that's already, they set the bar so low to be able to claim that they had success. I think they set the expectation at 200 guns would be collected, so that if they got 500, they could say, "See, gun owners are behind this." But the number I'm told is at least 2,000 in that region, and instead they get 22. So a little over 1% happening here, or not even 1%. Anyways, it is. I'm doing math on the fly. That's
Right,
never
on
a
the
good thing,
fly.
Jeanette.
No.
But
We were told there would be no math, Brian.
the the whole project is not looking good, and so Alberta will be instructing the RCMP that patrol rural areas. You're not participating. Well, guess what? I've looked at the staffing reports for RCMP across the prairies. They don't have the resources to do this. Municipal forces are stretched. They don't have the resources to do this. Here in Ontario, well, we don't have the RCMP except a little bit in Ottawa, a little bit here and there doing federal policing. They don't have the resources. The Ontario Provincial Police don't have the resources. And they've said, look, we're not doing this for you. A couple of municipal forces may sign on here or there in different parts of the country, but most of them are just like, no, we're busy with criminals. So I don't see how this program goes forward. This would have been an easy win for Mark Carney when he got in, just to say, you know what, this was a Trudeau thing. This was a really bad idea. We're going to focus on criminals with guns. We're going to focus on stopping guns at the border, the handguns that are used in crime, in dealing with issues like fentanyl and other serious crime. We're going to focus on that, and we're going to just let this lay. The guns have been banned for more than 5 years. There hasn't been a rash of crime with people in their AR-15s or their hunting rifles. It's not happening. But for whatever reason, they decided to stick with this, and I don't think it's going to work out very well.
Okay, Brian, speaking of, gun-related topics, or I guess weapon-related topics, you have written that Premier Smith is right in how to handle the issue of castle law, where you have the right to defend yourself and your home if someone breaks in. And you think other provinces should follow her lead. Maybe explain that a bit.
So this is related to the how they're going to block the gun ban. It's part of this Alberta
Okay.
within a United Canada Act. Um,
Mhm.
they're going to change the policies that are sent to police forces across the province and crown prosecutors and tell them stop charging people who are simply defending themselves in accordance with the law. This doesn't mean a free for all. It just means if you're acting reasonably to defend yourself, you're not going to be charged. Castle law already exists in Canada. Self-defense is legal, but the manuals that the provinces across the country have been sending to their crowns and their cops have told them to charge anyway. She's fixing that. Every premier should follow suit and say, adjust those manuals, stop charging people who are simply defending themselves.
Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for joining me today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.